Chapter 19, Pacifism and Diplomacy. Jadwiga had ridden at the head of Polish troops as they won back Ruthenian lands. She was firm in her attitude towards Prince Vytautas's increasingly extravagant demands for money, troops, and supplies for his eastern adventures. But in both these matters, it was easy for her to see her course compared with the difficulty of choosing the path in her relationship with the Order of Teutonic Knights. In their ambition lay Poland's greatest danger. Their golden period was waning, though they believed it had only begun. From Marienburg, military headquarters, seat of learning, center of commerce and agriculture, administrative post for conquered territories counting 2 million inhabitants, largely German colonists whom they had settled there, the White Cape still rode forth to devastate and acquire. That the Lithuanian was converted and his vast possessions joined, through a door of his own opening, with the Western Christian world, this reality they refused to accept. They pressed more and more frankly now toward their true objective. They pictured themselves as an ever-growing state carrying civilization into regions of barbarism. Their effort had become, in fact, the increasingly threatening embodiment of the age-long Drang nach Osten, which Poland blocked on the Vistula just as Lithuania held it at the Niemen. Jogailo had been born into the life and death struggle of his country with the order. Lithuanian captives had helped lift its walls and towers. At the mention of its name, his hand was on his sword. He watched for the day when he could throw the combined strength of Poland and Lithuania against it, and end for long, if not for all time, that fear focused on the towered battlemented red brick citadel on the Vistula Delta. Yet experience had taught that he must move with supreme adroitness. Jadwiga's position was not so simple. As Queen of Poland, she too recognized in the order her country's chief danger. But she had been brought up from childhood to see in the White Capes a holy brotherhood who were seeking to bring compensation to Christ and the Church in the north for losses to the infidel Turks of the south. How could she forget that one of the most prized episodes in her father's illustrious career had been his participation with these brothers in a crusade against the Saracens of the Baltic? Forget that his treasured sword hung in the hall at Königsberg. Oh, if King Louis were still living, their leader is said to have exclaimed, our well-wishing seigneur on all occasions, our defender at all times when we needed protection. We pray day and night for his soul. She could still hear William's uncle dwelling with Christian satisfaction on his own cooperation in a crusade. The priests of her father's court, the Chevalier poet Suckenwirt, other singers and narrators who had been her teachers, had set a crown of glory above the order's zeal. Thus it still held for her its deeply religious character. At times she felt herself trapped in some impossible contradiction, living as she did, with a husband but recently a pagan, and having to fight against the knights who wore emblazoned on their capes the cross of Christ. She struggled to reconcile these deep-seated impressions of the past with her knowledge of present reality. Furthermore, in a brutally warring century, she was by instinct and by young conviction a pacifist. She had a natural horror of battle and of all shedding of blood. This necessity of reaching a sound policy toward the order was the most difficult, the most important duty which as queen she faced, and the way in which she met it of itself lifted her to the level of greatness. The order must be driven safely beyond all Polish-Lithuanian frontiers. Polish-Lithuanian objectives must be secured against any encroachment. But this must be accomplished not by fighting, but by negotiation. Her faith was so strong that she believed she could succeed, despite the sword-brandishing spirit of her age. And so, using all her influence to win Jogailo's support, she embarked on a course of persistent, unwearying effort for a peaceful solution of an international difficulty, which can bear comparison with any similar undertaking of our own time. Indeed, her diplomatic struggle to bring the order to reason and justice was to stand as one of the extraordinary episodes of European history. Again and again, in critical moments, she handled thorny negotiations, treating directly, in intimate conversation with the Grand Master and influential leaders of this powerful organization, returning always with some kind of an arrangement, often, to be sure, unsatisfactory in itself, but yet sufficient to prevent armed conflict. Nor did she allow her desire to win by pacific means deceive her. She knew well that war loomed darkly on the horizon. Folded away in the chronicles of the order were occasional little notes written without Jadwiga's knowledge, warnings of the inevitable break if they persisted in angering my well-beloved husband. An amazing picture. From the gates of Marienburg on the Nogat, the army of white capes, the helmets tufted with peacock's feathers, the flashing swords, the accompanying hosts of archers, bear out upon the eastward road. And before them, attempting to block that road, stands the girl from Buda, the young queen of Krakow, daughter of their former defender. All her energies united in a spiritual and patriotic purpose. She could not prevent the climax toward which the drama was moving, but as long as she lived, by vigilant and incessant intervention, she succeeded in postponing that ineluctable conflict destined before long to make famous the field of Tannenberg 5 centuries before the campaign of Hindenburg. Big issues drew Jadwiga's mind away from lesser griefs. She put aside her personal hurt caused by the court scandal and Jadwiga's doubt of her. She also dismissed all estrangement or difficulty in their relations born of her pacifist diplomacy, and some asserted that there was serious estrangement. The meetings of the joint sovereigns were now increasingly important, and their deliberations ever more momentous. They had, from the beginning, agreed that matters of internal administration were particularly the king's responsibility, and international relations the queen's. And in general, they followed this division of direction, though obviously there must be constant overlapping, for their discussions covered all fields. While they were working out problems of war and peace with East and West, and of internal consolidation, they gave themselves together to the increasingly arduous social responsibilities of Wawel Chateau, and concomitantly they carried forward their chosen task of beautifying not only the capital outspread below, but also that other faraway capital, Vilnius. In this last decade of 1300, Krakow was starred on the traveler's parchment. Imagination kindled at the thought of the young queen, daughter of that great Angevin, Louis of Hungary, who in her woman's frailty had accomplished far more for Christ than ever Louis had. People wanted to see with their own eyes the living picture of the most beautiful, wise, and Christian queen of the Slav world, with the one-time pagan outcast, now given by the Pope, first place amongst all the kings of the earth in the affections of the church. They wanted to see the miracle of this joint rule in operation, so they headed their cavalcades toward Krakow. As they journeyed, they gathered news, both fact and rumor, so that arrivals were welcomed as the morning papers are today. One of the most interesting reports to reach the castle as the Christian world turned the last decade of 1300 was that the priest, John of Hesse, while visiting the Holy Land, had actually seen a unicorn and watched him at his water conning. This romantic interest in Poland's capital meant an almost continuous series of receptions, banquets, and tourneys on Wawel Hill, as it meant housing and feeding in the city below the great numbers of knights and attendants who accompanied princely visitors. In addition, there were repeated family visits and celebrations. The influx of guests from the new Polish-Lithuanian kingdom kept the Wawel chambers filled. Jadwiga's brother Wigund, who, because of his wit and charm, was a great favorite at the Polish court, had become engaged to the Duke of Opeln's daughter, Jadwiga. The queen herself had gone with Opeln to Niepołomice to celebrate the engagement, Jadwiga joining them there on his way home from Vilnius. During the 2 years preceding their marriage, this popular couple were often feted on the royal hill. No guests were more frequently and elaborately welcomed than Duke Zamość and Duchess Alexandra, Jadwiga's sister, who had become Jadwiga's intimate counselor. Jadwiga was never so happy as when Alexandra was with him. He showered her with gifts, jewels, stuffs, horses, and in a myriad ways expressed an affection which was perhaps the strongest that he knew. With her, he felt inhibitions melt away. He could be his true self, unembarrassed by the fact that he still at times wore the bracelet of bison's hide inscribed with runic letters, without which his whole old zest for the chase would somehow have suffered. He could feel comfortable about the Lithuanian hunters and valets he had brought down to accompany him on the chase, and about the Ruthenian cymbal and lute players whom he preferred, and unembarrassed by those yet unrelinquished habits which bound him to their mutual past. Friendships had sprung up, too, between members of the Mazovian suits and the Wawel courtiers, so that the whole hill looked forward to the visits of Zamovit and the king's sister. When they came, according to custom, Jogailo entertained Zamovit and Jadwiga, Alexandra. On these occasions, the great courtyard was alive with preparatory goings and comings. Extra wax was purchased so that the customary candlelight could be augmented by hundreds of additional gala tapers. Fanfares of welcoming trumpets greeted the most powerful duke and duchess of the realm and their following of knights as they rode through the lower gate. After the clanking line had wound up around the hill, Duchess Alexandra and her women were escorted to their apartments near the queen's, and Duke Zamovit and his knights to others farther away. There were informal exchanges of family news. Then a drive to inspect a newly founded convent or church, or some other outing or ceremony, pleasantly filled the late morning hours before dinner, which was served at 2 o'clock. At this function, as one elaborate course succeeded another, musicians and entertainers outdid themselves. The women's banquets fell nothing short of the men's. The supplies which poured into both kitchens were so carefully recorded that we can easily today follow on the pages 500 years old their clear lists. Often as many as 10 dishes were served as one course, each person choosing from them those he preferred. For a single banquet, in honor of Zamovit, Jogailo's chefs prepared 1 large and 8 small pigs, 62 chickens, 16 fat capons, 16 geese, 16 partridges, white turnips and beets and other vegetables, and used 4 pounds of butter and 60 pieces of cheese and 100 eggs in preparing the popular cheesecakes of the time. To these offerings were added many skins of wine, kegs of beer, and large quantities of hydromel. People usually made their beer at home, but the court procured its supply from Krakow. And on this same day, Jadwiga's chefs cooked for herself and Alexandra and their company 2 fat cows, 2 hams, 60 chickens, 7 well-larded hares, 8 partridges, 7 small pigs, quantities of turnips, carrots, and beets, and used 200 eggs, 12 cheeses, several pounds of butter, rice and mixed meal in the preparation of cakes and other dainties. For her tables, as well as for the king's, there was both white and dark bread. Something was always especially provided for the court poor. On this occasion, among other things, 6 hams, 15 chickens, and a great number of slices of dark bread. And the overbusy kitchens were at the same time giving thought to merchants and agents and other travelers, seeing, for instance, that the men who had brought 100 dogs from England for the king and queen were being properly fed. Occasionally, the sovereigns themselves enjoyed the variety of dining out. Royal custom did not bar their acceptance of certain invitations, those, for instance, of the bishop, or of important officers of state. At these times, combining business with pleasure, they discussed governmental problems with their hosts, and so the full days passed. Small wonder that people were attracted by Wawel hospitality and fascinated by the kaleidoscopic shifting of the spectacle within its encircling walls and tree greenery. From whichever angle they viewed this particular scene on the world stage, its brilliant aspects appeared yearly heightened, as the tremendous potentialities of the Polish-Lithuanian Union stood more clearly revealed. Thus, as the twilight of the century fell, Jadwiga's days were surcharged. She was now a mature queen approaching 20. Sufficiently overwhelming within earlier boundaries would have been her royal duties and aspirations. But now she was setting the objectives for a realm so far flung that she could but vaguely picture its frontiers. Moreover, when she gave up William and took Jogailo, she, who did nothing by halves, added to her responsibilities, not only those Lithuanian cares which directly concerned Poland, but throwing heart and brain into the enlarged situation. She shared her husband's every anxiety concerning his former country and its people. His multiple family difficulties troubled her more than those of her own pitifully diminished family, though she kept in as close touch as she could with her sister Mary, now ruling with Sigismund at Buda. To her internal difficulties was added again during the last year of this decade the imminent danger of invasion. The Ottoman Turks had pressed as far as Kosovo, where in a fatal battle they sounded the knell of Servia. Where would they next advance? Sigismund and Mary were appealing for help to the Christian states of Western Europe.